Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, depending on where you are. I think we're here on the East Coast. We're finally at the afternoon stage. Welcome to our webinar today, the release of our 2020 Crew Network Benchmark Study on Gender and Diversity in Commercial Real Estate. I'm excited and honored to share this report with you and look forward to hearing your questions as we go through the report. So first, I'd like to start and acknowledge that, the Crew Network has been leading the industry in research. Crew is the Commercial Real Estate Women's Network, so welcome to all of our members. Welcome to those of us joining us from other organizations. We're glad to have you here and have you listen to some of the data and information. So as I was saying, Crew Network, Commercial Real Estate Women Network, is a membership organization with 12,000 women globally. We are the industry's leading producer, if not the only producer, in specific to commercial real estate of data on women and diversity in this industry. Every 5 years, we undertake the benchmark study so that we can measure the progress of women in the industry. And for the first time in 2020, I'm proud and thrilled to share with you that we've actually expanded our lens to include questions related to diversity and work culture. We feel like these are important aspects that we need to be measuring and starting to benchmark in this industry if we are truly going to walk our talk around diversity, equity, and inclusion. Next, I'd like to acknowledge and recognize our benchmark study underwriters. Our 2020 industry research program partner and multi-year partner, in fact, is Capital One Commercial Banking. Thank you for their support as a underwriter. Our platinum supporter, ICSC, our colleagues in the industry, also dedicated and committed to understanding and expanding diversity and inclusion. ICSC was a platinum underwriter, senior underwriter, NMHC, the National Multi-Family Housing Council, as well as our associate underwriter, SIOR, the Society of Industrial and Office Realtors. So I would like to take a moment and just say that we don't accomplish things on our own. And this issue around diversity, equity, and inclusion we don't own it at Crew Network. We want everyone in the industry to be committed and to be cognizant of the facts from the study, as well as the opportunities that exist for all of us collectively to make change. So thank you to those who partnered with us as financial supporters, and especially to Capital One, who I know recognizes the value and aligns with our mission and focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion. So I'd like to give you a quick study overview. This report summarizes key findings from all four Crew Network studies from the last 15 years. So you'll see that we were able to compare and start showing you the progression or lack of progression over the last several years. And it provides some new insights, as I mentioned, on aspects that we haven't benchmarked before. The study posed 77 questions from previous studies, and then 8 new questions that examine diversity, workplace culture, and also we garnered some country-specific data this time around for Canada, the United Kingdom, and the United States. Crew Network enlisted the MIT Center for Real Estate as its independent research partner to survey, tabulate, and analyze and produce the 2020 benchmark study. MIT has been a previous partner of ours and a trusted partner for ensuring the quality and the analysis of the data. We are fortunate that we had 2,930 professionals across all commercial real estate sectors participate in this 2020 study. And it's important for me to note that the study was conducted January 2nd through March 31st of 2020. So all of the data and information here should be considered with a pre-COVID lens, because most all the responses were in before COVID really started overtaking our lives. There are 8 commercial real estate associations that partnered with CREW to distribute the survey, so I wanted to acknowledge and recognize and thank their constituents for participating. As you can see here on the slide is a list of those organizations and where the number of respondents we had from each of their groups. I'd also like to acknowledge some of those that you didn't see there, such as BOMA and CREFC as well, who participated in the distribution of the study. So as you can see here, whoops, let me just go back real quick. As you can see here, I'm going to cut my box down just a bit so you can see. As you can see here, that I noted that there were 2,930 participants. That is a 34% increase from 2015. And it's important again for me to note this collaboration from the other industry organizations. I do think that increase is due to their support, and again, to thank them for helping us. Because you need to understand that 82% of the respondents identified as women, 17% as men, 13% as Black, Indigenous, or people of color, and then 3.3% as LGBTQIA. And this is just good to have that framework and understand where the respondents, what they represented as you go through the numbers. So here we have a global snapshot, again, just a demographic look at where the numbers came from. And you can see overall in Canada, we had 251 respondents, and the split between men and women and non-binary. And then in the United States, UK did not have as great a response, but we are still new in that market. And I know over the next several years, we'll garner more participation from that market. And so there you see the total of the 2930 in terms of response rate. So now I'd like to look at the experience and education, another demographic point. The 2020 study represented a remarkable diversity of positions and specializations in the industry. So respondents represented an array of specializations and a wide range of positions, as you can see in levels from early career to more advanced and C-suite careers. Also, 70% of respondents indicated that they do business in office as their asset class. Just under 60% work in retail. And then the third and fourth most common asset classes were industrial and multifamily at 48%. So that's good to see. Followed by healthcare and the hotel sector at the lowest percentages of representation for this study. I would also note that you can see here from the graph that commercial real estate is a highly educated workforce. With regard to women in commercial real estate, 36.7% of respondents are professional women in the industry. And you can see here that it's 36.7 in the US, 35.9 in Canada, 31.8 in the UK. And so still the US has, not by a large margin, but still has more women represented in the industry. And I think one of the important things to note is you see here we have asset management at 44% women, 29% brokers, 34% developers, and 41% are finance professionals. So a couple things to note here. The percentage of women in commercial real estate over the course of 15 years of our study has remained fairly consistent at 35 to 37%. So what does that tell us? There's not been a lot of adding in. We haven't grown as in terms of gender in the segment or in the industry. And I would also add that asset management and finance have always had the greatest percentage of women year over year, although that share decreased in 2020. And finally, something to celebrate. I know that SIOR has been working diligently and been very dedicated to expanding the number of women in brokerage, and I'm excited to report that this year we saw a 6% increase in the number of women in commercial real estate. In terms of diversity in commercial real estate, 16% of professional respondents said that their workplace is very diverse. Now, I just want to acknowledge here that we asked this question because we want to start benchmarking change. And to do that, we had to ask the question. I don't think this is new news to any of us that commercial real estate is a predominantly white industry. But it's important to see that even though only 16% said that they consider their workforce or their workplace very diverse, 25%, I think it's 25% or have 25% in their workplace. However, more than half the respondents noted that they have noticed a significant or an impressionable number of a culture shift within their organization with regard to diversity, equity, and inclusion. And the two top reasons why, which we'll go into a little more detail later, but the two top reasons that they're seeing this shift are because of mandates from the top of the organization, from senior executives, or external pressure from outside their company coming in, which I'm all over that. So we'll talk about that. So there you see, we're going to watch these numbers closely in the coming years. I think that's a really important part of what we do with this benchmark, is being able to show you year over year if indeed there has been change. So we'll keep monitoring that, and we're excited that we have this data now to work with. I want to move to compensation. You know, probably of all of the pieces of data from this, compensation, for many reasons, was both enlightening and disappointing. So overall compensation, consistent with the last three studies, the 2020 study finds that there's a substantial compensation gap between men and women. Now, overall, the difference in total earnings, which includes salaries, bonuses, and commission, the gap is 34%. This is the disappointing part, right? It's 34%, but more importantly, or equally as important, is that it's an 11% increase from the last time we conducted the study. So since 2015, men's compensation has grown 11% overall in the overall compensation package. So disappointing, yes. Acceptable, no. So we're going to work on that, and we'll talk about it. Crew Network took a deeper dive on this data as well, and we're going to talk about that as we go through it. So the salary gap alone, so let's just talk about salary. Women earn 10% less than men in base salaries. So that you see here in this chart, the average fixed base salary in commercial real estate is $112,000 for men and $100,000 for women. So that shows you the 10% gap. So women are earning 90 cents for every dollar that men earn. The salary gap is wider, and this is the data that I'm excited that we have, but again, very discouraged. The gap is wider in base salary gap for Asian women at 14%, Black women at 15%, and Hispanic Latinx women at 20%. Again, it's not that we didn't know there was a difference. I just seeing these numbers just makes it such a reality and so disappointing. So let's go on in the same vein and then talk about the bonus and commission gap, which also has astonishing numbers. So women overall in the study earn 56% less in commission and bonuses than men. And the gap for Asian women is 73%. I'm sorry, Black women is 71%, Asian women 73%, and Hispanic Latinx women a whopping 74%. It's just really unconscionable to me that it's that broad of a gap. So there, one of the things we look at and we talk about as we're analyzing this is what are some of the dynamics that could cause the disparities in commission earnings. And some factors could be related to gender bias. Some could be bias in hiring practice or disparities in commission arrangements. Women may not be getting access to the largest deals or the best projects that have more commission. And then some other factors may be self-driven. It could be negotiation skills or just lack of awareness about what other structures are in existence in the company. So those are some of the reasons why we think this still exists. In addition, companies need to take a look at parity around bonus, commission, and salary, which we've done papers on, and we'll talk more about as well as we get to some of the closing remarks. So sources of income, this is interesting, and we continue to measure it. Commission represents the highest earning potential for commercial real estate professionals. Really, it's a very entrepreneurial business, and you can earn, your potential to earn is quite high, but women tend to not access those opportunities nearly as much as men. And you see that here over the 15-year period of our data, where you can see, typically in 2020, 34% of women and 43% of men said that they would not accept a position that includes commission as part of your compensation. And then you can see the breakdown here on the my right-hand side on the commission structure. Where income comes from in commercial real estate. And you can see that 74% for women of their income is from annual salary versus any kind of bonus or incentive. And then it's 58%. So again, we continue to measure this year over year to see if that's changing, and it's actually gone up for women. And we know that from past studies that women tend to be more risk averse to taking on roles that are commission based. So here's a look at compensation by sector. So women whose focus is on multifamily, which is here at the bottom left, you see the multifamily housing sector has the highest average annual income, including salary, salary, commissions, and other types of compensation. So you can look across the top and you see the all column, what women earn, what men earn, and then what the gap is. So if you look at multifamily overall, it's the highest. And if you look at the bottom right-hand corner, the public sector is the lowest paying for both men and women. And along with mixed use here in the middle of the right-hand side, you see the 25%. They show smaller income gaps. Public sector is 26% and mixed use is 25%. I would also give a shout out to the healthcare sector, which is a very low paying sector for women, but not for men. So healthcare and industrial tend to be the two sectors that have the largest income gap between men and women. So that's something to note. You look here at industrial at 37% and healthcare at 37% as well. Now, when we look at compensation and race, while the compensation gap is wider for women of color, gap varies by race at different career levels and specializations. So when you consider all forms of compensation, white men and women who participated in the study earned more than the average broker and finance professional, but were the lowest earning group among asset managers and developers. Asian respondents were the highest earning group among asset managers and brokers. And mixed race respondents were the highest earning, here in this column, the highest earning in the development and finance sectors. So still, I want to make a point of this too, still Black and Hispanic Latinx professionals earned less than average in almost all specializations. And here we take a look at compensation and race, and it couldn't be more clear where the chips fall. So if you look at the blue line is men, all men, the red line is all women, and the green line is Black, Indigenous, and people of color. So as you can see, even at the entry level here, men start at almost $10,000 more than women. I'm rounding up. And white women start at about $10,000 more than the BIPOC professionals. And so historically, in our past studies, we would always be able to say that men and women start out around the same at entry level. But here we're seeing for the first time a 9% gap in where women and men are starting out. And that is very disturbing. So that, for me, that's going backwards instead of forward. So our progress this year has not been moving forward. We are going backwards. The gap widens as you move up the ladder, as you can see here, where the chart splits. And as in previous studies, overall compensation gap with bonus and commissions is widest at the C-suite level at 33%, which is a 3% increase in 2020. So the BIPOC professionals on average earn less than white men and women at the lower career levels. However, among SVP, partner, and C-suite professional, the earnings gap narrows. It narrows, it doesn't close, but it narrows for the Black, Indigenous, and people of color relative to white women and men overall, which you can see over here a little bit. So, in fact, I think this is a really important point that's not showing visually here, but the average total compensation for a Black, Indigenous, or a person of color at the C-suite level is slightly higher than for the average woman as a C-suite professional. So that's a really interesting piece of data that we have that we didn't know before. So let's keep moving on. I know that there are probably a lot of questions and discussion going on in the chat. I can't look at it because I'm speaking, but I do want to note that we will be doing some Q&A at the end, and if we have time, we'll take some questions from the audience. And so let's continue on with the data, and then we'll go back and do some more. So here we're looking at career level. And what I wanted to note here is if you look at the top right-hand corner, 22% of male respondents occupied the C-suite in this study, compared with 9% of women. And those numbers, 9 and 22% for women and men respectively, are exactly the same as they were in our 2010 and our 2015 study. Now, when you look at the SVP partner numbers, so you have SVP managing director and partner level positions, the percent of women decreased from the last time we did the study from 27% to 22%. So it's down by 5%, the number of women at this SVP partner level. While the percentage of women at the senior level remained the same at 33%. So the industry, I mean, I think what we're seeing based on the study is we saw a greater proportion of women at the entry and mid-level, and it could indicate positive growth, that there are more young women coming into the profession, and there's a presence of a new generation coming up behind us. So we can be hopeful about that for sure, and that probably could be attributed to some of the great work that Crew Network's chapters are doing with the U-Crew programs and Crew Career programs. Finding young women to come into the business. So let's go on and look at family and other external factors. So this is interesting that more women than men. So let's just take a look first. 1 in 5 women say that their compensation or career has been adversely affected by their marital status or need to care for family. So 21% of women and 8% of men reported that. 79% of women said no, that it didn't impact, and 92% of men. I will note that women are more likely to acknowledge this than men are, but I think what's really interesting is that these percentages have remained unchanged, virtually unchanged, since 2015. So in 5 years, this is pretty much the same as it was. One of the other things that we've benchmarked over the years, which I find really fascinating, is the aspiration gap. So when we started the survey in 2015, we started asking respondents to identify the highest level to which they aspire in their careers. And the results indicated that men, much more than women, aspire to the C-suite. So that's still the case, as you can see from the study today. This year, 43% of men said they aspired to the C-suite, 32% of women, which is a 4% increase for both genders for this year's study. I think what's really interesting and notable is that women under 40 were more likely than women over 40 to aspire to the C-suite based on this study. So I think that's really interesting, and it's something we're going to have to watch over the next few years. Women under 40, more women said under 40 that they aspired to the C-suite than women over 40. When we look at how men and women view success and compensation in their careers, you can see here women's career satisfaction and perception of success has decreased across all industry specializations in 2020. So when we ask the question, you know, do you consider yourself very successful? If you look here, you can see women in 2020, it's at 56%, which in 2005 was 64%. So you can see it's gone down significantly, and it's at the lowest point it's been since we started conducting the survey. Men, on the other hand, 68%. It's less for men if you look at 70% in 2005, but still very high. And then if you look at if they're satisfied with their level of success, again, women have dropped down to 55% and men are at 63%. So let me, a couple points on this. I wanted to just mention that there could be several reasons for this decrease in considering themselves successful for women and satisfaction. If women are receiving lower pay, they feel like they have fewer opportunities for upward mobility, less access to leadership roles. They could be growing increasingly frustrated at being able to reap the financial benefits of an industry where really the sky's the limit if you work hard and you have great opportunity and access. So there could be a growing frustration about women, and there's more awareness and more transparency around data like this, where they're seeing the numbers, cold hard facts, you know, about what's happening in the industry and where they stand. You know, and there's been clearly a lack of progress, despite individual and collective efforts addressing gender bias, and we've been very vocal about that the last 4 years. This could, you know, the lack of progress could just be taking a toll on women in the industry. And the continuing disparities that they see. So I think that's an important point, and kind of we'll get to the call to action at the end of this. But I do think that it is this study, to me, is a call to action. And it's a call to action for all leaders to use this data as a jumping off point to really push and accelerate progress. It's just, you know, as we go on, you'll see some of the other numbers. So we look at success and satisfaction. Again, more men than women tie their increases in satisfaction to compensation. And you can see here why. Men are making well over $100,000 more than women. You know, women may place more emphasis on satisfaction on other non-income related factors, which is fine. And you'll see in the next, I think it's the next slide we go to. No, it's not yet. It's coming up. And then when we look at work-life balance, women's satisfaction with work-life balance has only increased slightly. Interestingly enough, and I love that this is happening, there was an 8% increase in men being very satisfied with work-life balance. And so what that says to me is I'm looking at the workforce, and what's happening is that we're seeing a younger generation of men who value and hopefully are working towards more work-life balance, and that it's important to them. And hopefully that will be another cultural shift we see in the workplace, along with some of the other factors that we worked with or that we looked at. When we look at importance versus satisfaction, this is really interesting. So look on the right-hand side under importance, you'll see that job enjoyment continues to be the most important factor for men and women. And right, don't we all want to be enjoying our jobs every day? I think that's fundamental. In 2020, and one other point for women, the top 4 most important factors for women here that you see on the left side of that column have not changed since 2015. In 2020, both men and women say that, looking over in the right-hand column, satisfaction, you'll note that they both say respective coworkers is the number one factor for satisfaction. And I really like that because that speaks to the importance that people are putting on being respected for the quality of their work, not for who they are, their gender, or what they look like, but being respected for the work that they do and being treated with respect. I think that goes a long way that both genders are saying that. And then new for this year in the women's top 5 satisfaction, if you go down here to number 4, you'll see that this is a new, this got bumped up the list to into the top 5. Working in a team-oriented environment is more important to women than ever before. And then if you look at number 5, time with family and job enjoyment has actually tied for number 5 for women. And one of the new factors that showed up for men, number 3 here, is disposable income has jumped onto the top 5 list for men that gives them satisfaction. What dropped off for men was being a decision maker. So they valued disposable income more than they valued being a decision maker. So this importance and versus satisfaction, also really important aspects. Again, going to culture and what environment is leadership creating that people value, that's going to make them stay in their jobs and be productive and contribute to the bottom line for companies. The next piece that we looked at was barriers to success in commercial real estate. And you'll see here we compared 2015 to 2020. The top 5 self-reported barriers to success for women has not changed since 2015. So they're all the same things. The only thing that happened, there has been a bit of a reshuffle where the lack of sponsorship, which was number 1 in 2015, has dropped down to number 3. And what has pumped up for women is lack of promotion opportunity, you see here in 2020. For men, the lack of promotional opportunity has risen back up to number 1 as well, which again, interesting, right? Both men and women are saying that. This item was also number 1 in 2020 for men. So there's a good look at the barriers to success, remaining mostly the same, but reshuffling a bit as times have changed. So in just looking at barriers to success for BIPOC, they listed the same barriers to success as women, with the exception to access to decision makers, which is listed here as number 5. So lack of promotional opportunity, lack of mentor sponsor, gender discrimination, excuse me, and some number 4 here, personal choice to maintain work and life balance can also be a barrier to success. Now, one of the things I mentioned earlier was that part of what measuring that we're starting to do going forward is workplace culture. And part of the reason why is in all the research and all the discussion and learning we're having around diversity, equity, and inclusion internally at Crew Network, one of the big factors we now understand is that there is no diversity without inclusion, right? So you can attract as many diverse people to your company as you want, but if they don't feel included, guess what? They're not going to stick around. And so it's good to see that there's a workplace shift and a cultural shift around diversity and inclusion. And again, 66% of respondents said that external pressures from the industry are causing this. And I just want to take a moment on that because this is something I've been talking about for 3 years. Leadership can bury their head in the sand if they want to on this, but I know that this is going to be a stake in the ground for a lot of companies. And State Street did it 2 years ago, I believe, that clients and business partners are not going to want to work with companies that are not diverse and inclusive. So they're going to look at who your executive leadership is. They're going to look at who the presentation team is when you go in to make a pitch. And so this is becoming more and more important. But the bottom line is that we know that diversity is one of the key creators of success for companies. So I think that it's important to recognize that wherever you are right now with your clients and your partners, you need to start thinking about 10 years from now, 10 months from now. in the near future, there will be companies that say we will only work with companies that have representation, women, people of color, Black, Indigenous, and State Street's stake in the ground was women. They were only going to work with companies who had women on their boards and in executive leadership. So I'll get off my soapbox on that, but I do think it's something we've been talking about for a long time, and this is validating that that's happening. So these are great numbers for us to begin benchmarking. Also, mandates from the top, from the CEO or other top executive, and you can see it goes down here. But the thing I'd like to point out too is that, this workplace culture shift is coming, from the top down. If 40% staff are demanding it, so it's coming from the bottom up, and then it's coming from the outside as well. So there's no getting around this. We are on the path that must be taken to move into the future. So there you go. We're leading. Another question that we asked this year related to the workplace culture and that we want to start benchmarking is behavior in the office, because that does influence whether people stay, women, men. And so the two questions we asked, one was have you experienced offensive behavior in the workplace? And again, remember, this is subjective to the individuals who responded. We did not give them parameters of what offensive behavior meant. So it could be sexist remarks, it could be racist remarks, it could be any kind of remarks. But to me, there's a difference between sexual harassment and offensive behavior. So here we see that 55% of women said they've never experienced offensive behavior, 80% of men. And then 45% of women said that they've experienced it one or more times, and 20% of men. So culturally, there's still a problem around appropriate behavior in the workplace. On the sexual harassment question, it was great for me to see this, that 93% of respondents said that they've never experienced it. 93% of women and 97% of men. However, we still have some work to do on this, because 7% of women said they did indeed experience, and 3% of men. Now, I just want to make a note too here is that women were much more likely to report that they experienced the offensive behavior, sexual harassment as well. So I just wanted to point that out. But again, we will be able to start measuring this as we go forward and see if there's change over time. Again, it goes to the requirement among leadership. What's unacceptable needs to be made known that it's unacceptable, and things need to happen when it happens. And I think that there is a level of there's less tolerance now than there may have been in the past preceding years than ever before, and I just see that growing and influencing this as time goes on. Now, we did take a minute to do, it wasn't a minute, it was part of the study. We did take some time to do a comparison on workplace diversity globally. And what's really interesting here is that you can see the compensation, what we know from the analysis we did globally among our areas where we have representation in Canada, the UK, and the US. Compensation gap is larger in Canada than in the US. Women make 18% less in base salary than men, and 69% less in bonuses and commission, while American women make 9% less and 55% less. And that's all women and all men. However, the one thing that I want to point out here that I think is really admirable is that workplaces in Canada are much more racially diverse than in the US or in the UK. You can see that here. 26% reported that. So while we have a lot of room to grow, and certainly the UK does, I think it's a nice shout out to the Canadians that they have made strides in that area. And again, we're going to be able to benchmark that data going forward. Now, here kind of is wrapping around some of what I said before is, I think for a long time, companies, and that's really general, executive leadership in commercial real estate didn't embrace diversity as a business advantage. But we know now, not just from our studies, but from other studies, that The inclusion of different people based on gender, race, ethnicity, and sexual orientation is a business advantage, and that to increase DEI, leaders need to continue to understand what the issues are that we revealed in this study, and we need to resolve them. Companies need to resolve them as a business imperative. This is no longer a nice to have or it's a good thing to do, but it's a business imperative, because think about my box. It's coming in from external sources, it's coming from the top, and it's going to be pushed to the bottom. There's no way that you're going to get away from this. And the bottom line is, your bottom line is going to be better because of the diversity, equity, and inclusion in your company. Now, I say this knowing that companies that prioritize diversity are outperforming others, and that was from a McKinsey study, including greater earnings, better governance, and greater innovation, and more opportunity. And so you ask yourself, why has progress been so slow? Why in this study do we see almost no progress? It's very disappointing, because we've been talking about this for a number of years. And so I just want to go back to my comment earlier. This is a call to action. This is a wake-up call for this industry to stop talking and take action. You know, I was thinking about the woman we profiled in our Push for Progress campaign from the UK, from England, Emily Pankhurst. Her quote is, deeds, not words. And that's kind of how I feel about the study this year is, stop talking, no more words. Let's see some action, real action taking place. And I know a number of companies have recently hired chief diversity and inclusion officers. That's a great first step. But there's so much more that needs to be done for women, for Black, Indigenous, people of color in this industry. And guess what? At the end of the day, when companies do that, you are going to be more profitable, more productive, more efficient. You will reap so many other benefits, including that bottom line. So how can we do this, right? Here's your call to action, leaders of companies. I've often say this, and it's not pretty, but I'm going to say it again anyway, is the fish rots from the head down. If you're at the top of the organization, if you're not committed, it's not going to happen. So top leaders must be invested, involved, measure, and be held accountable for diversity, and equity, and inclusion in the company. So we are calling you top leaders to be invested in this. We are calling you, hire that external consultant who has the objectivity to recognize the gaps, barriers, the unconscious or conscious bias, and then take action. Take action to make change and put accountability measures in place for all of your leaders so that everyone has a commitment to making this happen. Number 3, conduct pay equity tests regularly. We've seen other companies like Salesforce, Adobe have done these things, and it works and it matters. I would suggest that we need to focus on intentionality, recruiting a diverse workforce, and partnering with universities and organizations to seek out diverse workforce. We can no longer throw out job ads, and we can no longer turn to our buddy down the hall to say, hey, do you know anyone for this job? We need to say, where can we get talented, competent women? Where can we get people of color? They are out there. They are looking for the opportunities to work in innovative, forward-thinking commercial real estate organizations. So it's seeking intentionally rather than waiting for talent to come to you. And 5th, listen, we are on the forefronts of this. Your company should be aligning with our organization to make a statement to your current employees and your future employees that you care deeply about diversity, equity, and inclusion. We want you to be part of our mission, and we want to help your company succeed by advancing all women in commercial real estate. So what can you do personally? If you're not the boss, if you're here listening and you're not the boss, here's what you can do. Share this publication with your company leaders, your head of HR, and your fellow employees. Make this a point of conversation throughout the company. You can download the study, or you can request hard copies by going to our website. And I want to just say, we have about 15 minutes left and we have some questions. And I know I don't know if we'll get to all the questions that have been asked, but I just wanted to take a moment and say thank you to Laura Lewis, who without her management and leadership on this study this year, she's our Chief Marketing Officer at Crew Network, has been instrumental, along with our two co-chairs, who I will introduce in a moment. But I'd also like to do a shout out and say thank you to Christine Gorham, who is the Crew Network Global Board President, and thank her for her leadership this year and her ability to continually push forward in a year that has been so super unpredictable. So thank you, Christine, for your leadership as well. And now I'd like to introduce, I'm going to stop my share and I'm going to introduce, let me just exit out of this. I'm going to exit out and say welcome to our guests here today. I would like to invite, first I'd like to invite Jasmine Johnson to say a few words about ICSC's work, and she is the Director of Diversity and Inclusion at ICSC. So do you want to say a few words, Jasmine, please?
Sure, thank you, Wendy. Before I begin, I'd like to thank Crew's amazing staff and volunteers for all the work that you do to promote and advance women in the industry. Data shows that when companies draw on the experiences and knowledge of a workforce that reflects the companies they serve, they are better able to understand and meet the needs of their consumer. Yet, the commercial real estate industry, one of the most community-centric industries, continues to lack diversity. Sure, there's anecdotal evidence that speaks to why this lag continues, but anecdotes are not enough. For the last 15 years, the Crew Benchmark Study has provided industry leaders, practitioners, and associations like ICSC with the critical data needed to guide the intentionality of our policies and practices around not only diversity, but more importantly, equity and inclusion. Did you notice I said leaders, practitioners, and associations? That's because it will take a concerted effort to produce real change. With that said, ICSC is committed to improving diversity, equity, and inclusion. We are working with our members to eliminate barriers to barriers to access for young women and people of color by providing opportunities for them to explore and learn about careers in retail real estate, connecting them to industry mentors, scholarship opportunities, and paid internships. We will consistently re-examine how we identify volunteers, speakers, award recipients, and implement policies and practices to increase diverse voices. Last but certainly not least, we will continue to partner with Crew to provide a space for our members to learn, collaborate, and strengthen their DE&I efforts. Last week, the world lost a great talent, Chadwick Boseman, an actor who committed his career to portraying historical Black figures. Over the last few days, I found myself revisiting many of his interviews and speeches. His words touched me more deeply than they did in the past, and I heard things I didn't hear before. So before I go, I'd like to leave you with a quote that I think speaks to the core of our DE&I efforts. In an interview about his record-breaking film, The Black Panther, he said, "The only difference between a hero and a villain is that the villain chooses to use that power in a way that is selfish and hurts other people. Information is power. So I ask you today, what do you plan to do with the power that Crew is giving you?" Thank you.
Jasmine, thank you so much. Great comments and a beautiful quote. And that's a great question for all of us. So thank you so much and truly appreciate the commitment of ICSC. You guys have been a fabulous partner. Would also like to invite, Capital One has been our partner, as I mentioned, for a number of years. And we've been very fortunate to have them in partnership. I would like to introduce and invite Una Robinson, who is the Senior Vice President and Commercial Bank CFO for Capital One, to join us now and say a few words about Capital One and their work. And Una, just so much appreciate this partnership, has meant so much to us, so thank you.
Thank you, Wendy. Good morning, everybody. Having built my career as a woman on Wall Street, being part of a values-driven organization has become the most important factor for me when deciding to join that organization. And adding to that, growing up in South Africa, diversity, inclusion, and belonging has become a deeply personal aspect to my daily consciousness. Capital One's culture is built on two core values: excellence and do the right thing. These values define who we are and guide how we work together, innovate, and serve our customers and communities. And to live up to these values, we must focus on diversity, inclusion, and belonging. Since joining Capital One in January of this year, I have been struck at how the organization leans in on these core values, devoting significant time, energy, and resources to allow each employee, and we call ourselves associates, the time and support to live these values. Capital One has long committed to creating and fostering a safe, diverse, and inclusive workplace. And we are encouraged by some progress we've made. And within the last year, we've been listed on the best companies for working mothers, best companies for multicultural women, and top 50 companies for diversity, and many others. While we are proud of these efforts, we realize there is much more to be done. And we are focused on a few key areas: ensuring our systems and programs promote fairness and equity, creating a culture of belonging where everyone can thrive, and attracting and developing talent from all backgrounds and experiences. But we cannot talk about diversity and inclusion without acknowledging how the movement for racial justice has shaped our public dialogue this year. At Capital One, we firmly denounce racism in all its forms. We commit to a safe, diverse, and inclusive workplace that has always been at the heart of who we are. In June, Capital One announced a $10 million investment in organizations who are advancing the cause of social justice for Black communities. We also made new investments in 2 national organizations dedicated to the fight for racial equity and justice, including building on our successful partnership with the National Urban League and establishing a new relationship with the Obama Foundation. We continue to explore additional opportunities for meaningful partnership on this very critical issue. We do know the road is long, but we are committed to seize upon this opportunity to drive change. And it is hard to change what we cannot measure. And that's why we are so grateful for partners like Crew, who look to data to help us understand where we are and how we measure impact and how we need to drive change. And with that, I'm happy to hand it back over to Wendy.
Una, thank you. I just want to comment too that your comment, it goes to culture, that you're choosing to work in a place where the company shares your values. And I find that so much now with the younger generation. And Capital One, not just based on what you said, but what I've known from working with the company for a while, is truly walks their talk. I mean, with the company, with the employees, the associates, and I think we should all strive to be on those lists of best places to work, most diverse places to work. And I would finally like to congratulate Capital One on the major financial investment you're making on for Black communities and on the cause around racial justice and social commitment to making change. It's just, it's huge, and that's wonderful to see. And so thank you. Now I would like to recognize, thank, and introduce 2 very important people to Crew Network, and to Laura and to myself. Cecilia Hyun and Rhonda Holland were actually co-chairmen of the Industry Research Committee this year and have been instrumental in helping us move this project forward and get to where we are today. So welcome, Rhonda and Cecilia. We're going to talk a little bit about the study, and I understand you all have some questions to pose to me.
We do. Thanks, Wendy. There's a lot of information in the study to digest. So we thought we'd ask a few questions to try to dive into the data a little deeper, pull out some information. So to start, one of the positive takeaways from the study was that there was an increase in participation of younger respondents, particularly women. However, as you noted, the overall percentage of women in the commercial real estate industry has remained about the same. If the industry has been successful in increasing the pipeline at the entry level through programs like the Crew Foundation Scholarship, what do you think some of the reasons are for the continued attrition rate at the more experienced levels?
Yeah, it's very clear to us on the positive side that there are more young women coming in. I think my kind of assessment analysis is that there's an older generation of women, those women who started Crew back in the late 70s and mid 80s. I think we're seeing a bit of a retirement of some of the older generation. But I also think that we're losing some people at mid-level who are getting frustrated by the lack of progress or the lack of opportunity they have, that they're saying, like, while I love what I'm doing, or I like the opportunities that I potentially have, I'm not getting them. So I can switch careers and go in another direction and not be so frustrated. So I do think that that's playing into it. So what we need to do is keep drawing the younger generations into the, while at the same time being able to create cultures that keep women and people of color in the industry.
Hi, Wendy. I thank you for having me today. And I know we're a little short on time, but I have to give a shout out to all of my Canadian counterparts, because sitting in Canada, we really felt like we were a big part of the information this year. We really want to thank Crew for that. So I'm going to give Canada a shout out, because in the study you noted that we do have a more racially diverse CRE industry. And I just want to ask, in your opinion, why has Canada been more successful in achieving our greater DEI in our workplaces?
I'm going to give you the short answer than the long answer. The short answer is because you've worked harder at it than other countries. And I think there's been intentionality. So I had to do some research on this one. There's a global index. It's called the Global Diversity Index, and it's conducted by Oxford Economics. And in that index, it says that Canada has one of the most diverse labor forces in the world. In fact, Canada ranked 7th globally on the list, so congratulations. And Canada is globally known for being a welcoming and accepting country. I think we can all agree the Canadians are the nicest people, right? So I think that's a factor. And Canada, according to the study or the index, scored high marks across the board for sexual and personal freedom, and topped the charts for overall personal freedom. So Canada is already well known for its French community. So bonjour to anyone who's here from Montreal, and is actually one of the most ethnically diverse countries in the world. I mean, how many of you knew that? I think that's pretty impressive. And it's home to 195 different languages. So there you go. Now, not only is Canada represented well within our study, but now you know why Canada is the country it is, because there is so much representation already there. And we have 2 minutes left. So is there one more question that you want to try to squeeze in before we have to run off into the sunset? Or Laura, do you want me to wrap up now or take one more question?
One more question would be great from Cecilia.
Okay.
Great. I'm going to actually ask one that appeared in the chat, and I apologize to everyone we didn't get to. But how do we address the unconscious bias that still exists within the industry among white male professionals who are still in positions of power and authority relative to hiring and promotion and recruiting? Yeah,
that is so difficult because of your job security. But I got to tell you that we need to speak out. It needs to be made unacceptable to have the bias. And so if it's intentional bias is one thing, unconscious is a different thing. So companies need to invest in eradicating bias. But I also think that we need to call out when we see things that are biased or disrespectful to women. And here's the thing, I know a lot of women will say, I don't want to lose my job, or if I speak out, then I get put in a box of that's a troublemaker. But here's the thing. Do you really want to work in a company that treats you like that, or that allows that to go on? Because kind of where I'm at is, what if we all just said, the heck with it? We're not working for those companies anymore. There would be a mass exodus of, I know this is kind of me going off on my soapbox, but I think that we worry a lot about needing the job that we have. And my thing is that if there's behavior or bias that are unacceptable and holding us back, why do we want to stay there? but I do call on leaders to change bias. And part of that is really training, because even right now we know there is bias that's unconscious. And I think we all have bias, and so it's not to one group or another. So we need to work on that. That's not the unconscious piece, but there's intentional as well. So it's calling it out, calling on leaders to eradicate it, and then being willing to make decisions to work in a place, as Una said, that shares the values you share, and finding that. And so thank you for asking that question, whoever asked it. It is one of the most difficult things, but I encourage you to be bold and courageous and brave, and take care of you. I mean, at the end of the day, you have to be happy where you're at. And remember, job enjoyment and respect of your colleagues were the top two things on the list. That's what we should all be going for. So I'm just going to conclude here to say that there is a lot of data in this study. We've touched on some highlights here, and I thank Rhonda, Laura, and Cecilia again for your leadership, and the entire committee really for everything you've done. Our board liaison, Jackie Orcutt. Thank you for being here, and I encourage you, take action. Ask for action within your company. Let's move this together. Let's not wait another 5 years and find out no progress has been made. That will not sit well with me, just putting that out right now. Thank you all. Please contact us if we can help. We're happy to collaborate, happy to deliver this information to your companies, to your colleagues, whatever you need. We want to make this something that everyone hears. So thank you so much.